Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about the Wisconsin State Supreme Court primary election that occurred last evening, and good news for the Democratic Party as they head into 2024 and election years beyond. The State Supreme Court election was one that is in this idea of nonpartisanship. It's one that is rooted in the fundamental idea that Supreme Court justices should not be associated with either political party. But as is standard with American politics, parties do have favorites, and these favorites are very clearly and both publicly expressed, especially in the state of Wisconsin. What we saw last evening was that the Democratic Party, in its combined vote share, defeated Republicans quite astonishingly. The reason I mention this, Wisconsin is certainly going to be a swing state as we head into the 2024 presidential election, but unfortunately for the GOP, in an off-cycle year, in an off-term election, Democrats had a combined vote share of nearly 54%. Now, the reason why that is so significant is because back in the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden only won this state by less than 1 point. In 2022, Tony Evers, the incumbent governor, defeated Tim Michels by a margin of around 3 to 4 points. This margin here was significant, largely because Tony Evers was in fact on track to lose this governorship, even by my own estimations, but ultimately surprised the nation. In this victory, alongside many others for the Democrats in the 2022 midterm elections, was one that showed that maybe states aren't trending as rightward as we otherwise might think. Again, going into 2024, Wisconsin is going to be a state of complete and total interest because it's 10 electoral votes, and it truly could determine who the next president of the United States might be. And considering how close it was back in 2020, considering there might be a rematch also in 2024, it really just draws in speculation about the competitive nature of this state in future elections. But this election in specific, the one that occurred last evening, was meant to be one that Republicans did quite well in. Looking back at the history of it, at least in 2019, a year where Democrats went on to win the presidential, Senate, and House elections just a year later, the Wisconsin race went to the Republican-backed candidate by about a half point across the state, 50.2 to 49.7. And it was this margin that showed us that while Wisconsin was getting closer, Republicans still, in many cases, had the upper hand, at least when it came down to the Supreme Court elections. Republicans have maintained a majority for the past 14 years, and 2019 wasn't going to change that. But fast forward until now, and while the election has not officially occurred, we are heading into a runoff election in April with the top two candidates, where the Democrats are likely going to win. It's not a secured victory yet. April 4th is a long way away, but it is one that is indicated by the turnout and the overall margin of victory for Republicans en masse or Democrats en masse in this specific election. When you also look at the turnout level too, you're talking about a pretty significant turnout. When you look back at 2019, I think the margin here with the turnout level was 27%, if I remember correctly. Actually, no, 35%. You are above that in this primary process as well. And what I will say is that it looks like Democrats turned out in droves even in this primary election. Leading into this general election, Republicans, quite frankly, should have had a higher vote share, especially given that this is supposedly another year of Republicans doing well. But that combined with the results in Virginia's 4th District and numerous state legislative special elections, the Democrats, in fact, look like they are improving relative to their 2022 and 2020 margins of victory. It's fascinating to watch the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election because on April 4th, we will also get, yet again, another test of the Republican Party's ability to win. They did win here in 2019, yet ultimately lost the state a year later, which means if they lose this one this time around with even better circumstances for the GOP, it probably means that Wisconsin isn't going to be as winnable as they otherwise might think. And especially considering who's advancing to this general election, you have Daniel Kelly, who is described by NBC News as a conservative with connections to a plan to reverse the 2020 election results. He's going to face against a Democrat, or a liberal, as they are describing it here because they are nonpartisan, but the Democratic-backed candidate. So looking at Daniel Kelly as this conservative leading, candidate for office here, the entire idea that the 2020 election is going to be relitigated is something that is going to be raised as a major concern by Democrats here. It seems as if Republicans have not learned from the 2022 midterm elections, where they lost control of the Senate. In fact, Democrats expanded their overall majority. And the reason why this happened was because these candidates embraced Donald Trump's ideas surrounding the 2020 election, Donald Trump's ideas surrounding the insurrection, Donald Trump's ideas surrounding election insecurity in 2022. We saw Democrats win in Pennsylvania. We saw them win in Georgia. We saw them win in Arizona. We saw them win in New Hampshire. We saw them win in Nevada, right? You look at the governor races, well, very similar to what we saw in Wisconsin. Democrats won in Arizona. They won in Kansas. They won in Maine. They won in Michigan. They won in New Mexico. They won in New York. They won in Oregon. They won in Pennsylvania. They won in Wisconsin. Why might that be, despite it being supposedly a red wave year? Newsflash, it wasn't. Well, because these candidates embraced ideologies that voters were not behind. And specifically in the state of Wisconsin, we know that to be true. But now that we're heading into a general with Donald Trump's ally-style candidate, or in a sense, hand-picked candidate, Democrats are looking better for their chance at winning. Because in the primary process, the top Democrat got 46%, the top Republican got 24%. The next candidate, also a Republican-aligned candidate, 22%. And then finally, another Democratic-aligned candidate at 8%. Overall, though, the combined vote share here, 54 to 46. That's nothing near what it was back in 2020. 9 points, 8 points is very different than half a point or less than 1 point. These are huge differences, and it makes all the difference because if Democrats are winning in Wisconsin by 8 points in 2024, they're expanding off the 2020 electoral map. Not only are they winning again, not only is Biden winning again, but Democrats are expanding across the field. In fact, possibly winning back control of the House and maybe even retaining control of the U.S. Senate. But the state of Wisconsin hasn't always been easy for Democrats. I will say that history isn't trending in their favor. In 2008, Barack Obama won this state by 14, then he won it by just 7 in 2012, and then in 2016, Donald Trump won the state by a larger margin than Joe Biden did in 2020. Donald Trump won here by 0.77%, less than a point, but still significant enough. You're talking over 20,000 votes gave Donald Trump the upper hand in Wisconsin in 2016. That went on to be 20,000 again in 2020 that gave Joe Biden the upper hand. But Wisconsin in itself has gotten a lot closer, at least from what it used to be like under Obama. And while that may be a combination of factors with a decrease in overall Rust Belt support, the overall disconnection with the automotive industry bailout that was associated with Barack Obama, whatever it might be, Barack Obama's numbers are nowhere near where the Democrats are now. In a bad way. In a bad way for the Democrats of today. But last night's results told us something. That it looks as if Wisconsin, with so much at stake, is leaning towards the Democrats. Now, Wisconsin's Supreme Court election actually does determine quite a bit. As you may have seen from the headline, it deals a lot with the abortion ban. But it's also issues beyond that. You're talking gerrymandering on both a congressional level, on the national level, or state legislative gerrymandering, things that could actually force Wisconsin to draw fair maps. Taking a look at Wisconsin's state legislative maps, those are some of the most egregiously drawn gerrymanders I have ever seen in my life, to a point where in one election, Democrats won the national or the statewide popular vote by 10 points, yet only won a third of the seats in the state legislature. How does that happen? Gerrymandering, ensuring that Republicans have an unfair and explicit upper hand when it comes down to the Wisconsin state elections. And that was found to be true in every single way. So looking at the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, it isn't just abortion. It is so much more than that. And it's 14 years of Republicans being in power that Democrats, at some point, if they win this, will be able to reclaim control, will be able to establish precedent, shoot down laws, crack down on maps, whatever it might be. Democrats / liberals / the justices will have the opportunity to do so. But we aren't really worried too much, at least on that level just yet, about what would actually be done in this position. We have spent a long time talking about the primary election, but I think we really are just underselling how significant of a performance this was for the National Democrats. When you're taking a look at the area surrounding Milwaukee, you're looking at the Democrats pulling away significant chunks of the vote there, but the overall vote share for Democrats is quite significant at that point. You're talking over 70% of the vote going towards the Democratic Party, which makes sense, especially given where it was back in 2020. But when you look at the subtle improvements, for instance, let's take Milwaukee County, for example. Joe Biden got 69% of the vote here. That's interesting. 69% is good for Joe Biden. But when you look here, you have 55%, 22 and 14, and you're talking about a combined vote share here of 64%. Or where was the county actually in specific that I wanted to take note of? I know there was one that was talked about quite a lot on Twitter. Let's go ahead and see here. Oh, I'm adding up the numbers wrong. I was wondering why. I also want to talk about Dane County in a second. That was the county. I know they were talking a lot about the dumps that came out from here. But you're looking at the combined vote share here, and Democrats are at 69%. And alone, that brings them to where they need to be. But you look at Dane County, and you look back, okay, where Joe Biden was in 2020. This is the one, 75.5%, Madison area, went to Joe Biden. You look at the results here, 69%. Everett Mitchell is the other Democrat in the race. Combined here, 83%. So 83% in that county versus 75.5% for Joe Biden, which is the reason that drives up these numbers. There has to be an improvement somewhere, and it's happening in these Democratic areas. Now, what you found in Milwaukee is that it's on par, but when you have improvements in other portions of the race, that's when it really makes a difference. Dane County in specific, which has a huge population, really is where it makes a difference, because Milwaukee is big. Milwaukee has population centers, but so does Dane County. I'm interested to see what some of the other improvements were here in some of these other areas. I don't think that's particularly a blue county. I want to see, though, Menominee County, I believe. If I'm saying that wrong, please correct me, but let's go ahead and see here what it's looking like on that level. Maybe we'll just be able to figure it out based off of a process of elimination here. So 49 plus 22 plus 21, so 49 plus 8, 57%. Let's compare that to 2020 presidential. That's interesting. I don't think I'm actually counting it correctly. I guess maybe there wasn't that many votes cast in this. Very interesting. Okay, I guess that one was a low. I don't know if I necessarily trust the 88 votes in total there. But regardless, though, the improvement has to come from somewhere, and it comes from many parts of the country or the state, but Dane County in specific. I don't know what's going on with that county. I really don't think that these numbers make the most sense. If I'm wrong, though, and they do make sense, please let me know down below. But I don't know if I necessarily trust just less than a few hundred votes across the entire thing. Maybe I'm overestimating the amount of people that vote in this, but in 2020 presidential, you're talking about roughly 3 million, talking about 1 million here. That doesn't make sense in terms of proportions, but I'm not going to go too far deep into the math on this all. What I am going to say, though, is that overall the Democratic Party should be impressed. They should be impressed to the extent that they turned out their base, and they should also be happy that the person who won this essential Republican nomination is not a moderate. It's not somebody who could be winning these people over the way that maybe another Republican might. Donald Trump's election and hand-picked candidates in 2022 ultimately resulted in losses for the GOP on the overall national level, whether House races, Senate races, gubernatorial races. Most of the races that were contested by Democrats and were actually competitive, Democrats won. Democrats won most of the toss-ups in the House. Democrats won most of the toss-ups in the Senate. Democrats won most of the toss-ups in the governor races. And 2022 was meant to be this wave, and the reason it wasn't was because of one person in specific, President Donald Trump. And I think that is really going to show on April 4th, because as of right now, what I'm expecting from the Democrats now is that, one, they turn out in full force, and that they win in Wisconsin on April 4th. And should they win by this supposed 8-point margin of victory, I can guarantee you 2024 looks a lot brighter for President Joe Biden. It looks a lot brighter for a lot of national Democrats, especially given that they're not considering Wisconsin anymore for a national convention, that they're not considering Wisconsin as this focal point for 2024, because if they can win these voters over while also hitting Atlanta, hitting Phoenix, getting Nevada, getting the Sunbelt region, I mean, generally speaking, in these presidential elections, you're worrying, you're jumbling, you're moving around left and right, moving from state to state. But generally speaking, appeals to regions are often the most effective. Joe Biden got it in the Rust Belt in 2020, and if he can get it again, not only can he expand upon that, as these numbers might be suggesting, but he can do better in other parts of the country because of this expansion in this part of the country. Wisconsin will be a swing state in 2024, and certainly one to watch closely. Wisconsin will be one of the most important races in 2024, and that has been determined already. President Donald Trump's influence, or I guess inspiration, making its way into this race in the face of Daniel Kelly is also likely going to be a reason why Republicans lose this race and why Democrats did quite well in this primary election. Let's not take this primary election and treat it as if it's the gold standard for predicting elections, but I can tell you one thing, the Democrats are doing a lot better now than they were in 2019, and in just a year after that past election, Democrats went on to win a trifecta. Use that information how you will. But in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, as the title of this video might suggest, Republicans are in a pretty bad place when it comes down to this race, which might be an indicator they're in an even worse place when it comes down to some others. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.